On Monday, Nigerians were shocked to hear that suspended Deputy Commissioner of Police, Abba Kyari, had been busted for alleged illicit drug trafficking. Kyari had earlier been indicted for his alleged involvement with advance-free fraudster Ramon Abbas, also known as Hushpuppi, and was facing possible extradition to the United States to stand trial. The suspended police officer, alongside other policemen, was declared wanted by the National Drug Law Enforcement Agency, NDLEA, for failing to honor its invitation, but was later arrested by the police and handed over to the NDLEA. The disgraced so-called super cop was caught in a sting operation over his involvement with an international drug cartel that operates the Brazil-Ethiopia-Nigeria illicit drug pipeline. The NDLEA said Kyari had questions to answer in the ongoing drug case. Now joining us to discuss the latest saga involving Kyari and what this shows about the level of sleaze in Nigeria's law enforcement agencies is Dele Farotimi, a lawyer, fiery critic, and civil rights activist. Mr. Farotimi will also be giving us his views on the Electoral Act Amendment Bill, which President Muhammadu Buhari has pointedly ignored since it was retransmitted to him by the National Assembly, as well as the state of play ahead of the 2023 general election. Welcome to the show, Mr. Farotimi, and good morning.
Good morning. Good morning, Dele. Thank you for joining us.
Good morning.
Well, you had Tundun's...
Good morning, Doc.
Yes.
Thanks for having me.
You're welcome. You had Tundun's detailed introduction. Well, from Super Cop to Cop Puppy. What's your take on the travails of DCP Abba Kyari, who we have now been told has another issue, drug-related issue, in addition to the outstanding issue about the magistrate court in the U.S. that had declared him wanted for money laundering, wire fraud matters. Who is on trial? Nigeria itself, the police, Abba Kyari. Your take.
Well, good morning again, Doc. The Nigerian police and the Nigerian authorities are rulers. Maybe even some of us will prefer to focus on Kyari and make this exclusively about Kyari. But we would only, as usual, be lying to ourselves as to exactly what we are dealing with. Kyari is not just the rogue cop. We're talking about a rogue system. When the law enforcement agent, who is meant to enforce laws, have no laws to enforce, he inevitably begins to enforce impunity, which is the only thing available for enforcement, because he necessarily has to be selective as to who he pursues and who he leaves alone. So when you have that kind of system in place, and then somebody like Kyari leverages on the impunity that already governs the system, what you then get is that we selectively raise noises about Kyari as though he were to be some outlier. Yeah, it was okay. The press and everybody were busy shouting that he was a super cop. But these stories were always there, but they were blithely ignored. He was about the only police officer I knew of who would be going on a special operation, and the press would accompany him. He would be in the bush looking for kidnappers, and they'll be taking pictures. I seem to recall one of your shows where Dr. Ruben actually raised this point on the morning show. So we can conveniently ignore the fact that he's only a type and then begin to talk about him as though he were to be an isolated incident and that nobody else is doing the same. No, there are several. He's not alone. It's a systemic problem. So it's Nigeria itself that should be looking in the mirror. This is not just about Abba Kyari. A system enabled him. He was supposedly suspended, and yet he was still leading operations. These are issues that we should honestly look at ourselves and tell ourselves the honest truth. Kyari is not an exception. He is the rule, and that is how our system runs. So if we're talking Kyari, it is convenient for his cohorts that we focused on him, but it goes beyond that. And we all know it too.
Yes, Dele, that's the danger of that pointing finger. It just discourages self-accountability. Very few will argue with the point that you just made. And that same point that you just made about the systemic rot has led some to believe that this entire NDLEA press conference, the arrest by the police, handing over of Abba Kyari to the NDLEA is some huge, pantomime orchestrated to somehow prevent Kyari's extradition. A lot of people believe that because there's just such a lack of trust. However, I'd like us to go through it. I mean, is that the logical approach? Why not then just exploit Article 4 of our extradition treaty between Nigeria and the United States of America, which carries more weight in America than any enactment of the Nigerian National Assembly? According to Article 4, if he was being tried for that offense of assisting Hushpuppi to imprison and torture Vincent Chibuzo here in Nigeria, then there would be no need for extradition. The Nigerian government has not, charged him for that. Why go this long-winded route that will only defer and not discharge any request for extradition?
Well, when you live in an environment where the facts are stranger than fiction, when you live in an environment where the government spins all manner of stories to cover the truth routinely, and don't worry, I'm not traveling too far, just October 2020. We still can't tell the truth of what happened that day because the government is the greatest concealer of the truth. So you have a situation where routinely the Nigerian is always played. We expect the worst of those who rule us. So yes, it might sound like it's a conspiracy theory. And anyone who says that would also be completely right to throw that around. But those of us, and I happen to be one of those who have looked at the wordings of Section 3, subsection 3 of the Extradition Act, and it's very clear. If you follow the precedents in Abba and the Attorney General of the Federation, the recently delivered ruling of the Supreme Court, which Dr. Abati essentially diagnosed, he analyzed a few days ago, and I watched as well. The court is always going to strictly construe any piece of legislation. And if you look at the clear wordings of Section 3, subsection 3, you will see very clearly that as long as the man in question is standing trial or has been sentenced for something else different from that for which he is being sought, he cannot be extradited. I'm not familiar with the Article 4 that you just spoke about. I can't speak to it. I might very well be wrong, it's very possible. But in an environment where the government is the chief promoter of conspiracy theories, and we also know that the only time anybody is caught and prosecuted for anything in Nigeria is when he has run afoul of our local laws. So it's not improbable when people look at these facts. It might very well be a conspiracy, and we hope that it is, because it at least cleans the rest of us of this guilt if the person who has been scapegoated in this situation, Abba Kyari, is indeed taken to go and face the court as has been requested. But in all honesty, it is not something to be lightly dismissed. We were all here. I recall when I was telling you the other time that nothing will happen to Magu. What has happened to him? It's only in Nigeria you hear that kind of noise. You hear people being put through all kind of trials that are unknown to law within Aso Rock, and the next thing, nothing happens to the man. He was merely removed and somebody else replaced the person. Look at the Adiza Bala Usman issue as well. So you have a situation where we are used to being played. So we are not being unnecessarily paranoid when we find it difficult to accept that the NDLEA, that has not in any part of its history ever arranged somebody based on all this kind of sting operation before, suddenly woke up and started acting movies. We hope that justice will be done, but don't blame us for being skeptical. It's because in Nigeria, history has taught us to expect the worst, and they've always surpassed the worst. So please, it's not our fault.
No,
It's
it's
the reality
it's really
of our
not.
lives.
It's really not. And you're not wrong. I just want to clarify. You're citing Article 3 of a Nigerian law, Nigeria's Extradition Act, saying that if somebody has been charged for a crime, any crime, that until the end of that process, they cannot be extradited. So what I was saying is that that is a deferral at best, not a discharge. And I was referring to Article 4 of our treaty with America, which Uncle Sam will respect more, that if he has been charged with that same crime in Nigeria, then they can never extradite him again, because that will then fall foul of the rule against double jeopardy. But your point that you've made is very clear. I just wanted to, clarify on that point.
But in any case, extradition is not automatic. Will you consider Abba Kyari a fugitive at this point, despite the U.S. Magistrate Court declaring him wanted? Because under Section 9 of the Extradition Act, 1966, the U.S. has to make a formal request. That formal request has not been made. And that is why some people are saying maybe this is an attempt to cover up, because one big defense that Abba Kyari can bring up in court is that he was not guilty of any money laundering, that he received the money for tailoring purposes. He helped Hushpuppi to make very fine clothes. Would that defense, protect him? And do you think that there is an attempt at, delay tactics or cover up on the part of the Nigerian authorities? We're even told that the panel has said the best punishment for him is for him to be demoted and for him to continue with his job as policeman.
See, when we live in a place where the law does not rule, such as our country, and you know very clearly that the law does not rule when you have different standards for the treatment of the same issue, depending on who is involved. Mr. Kyari's colleagues in the police, have been told, were merely going to give him a slap on the wrist and he was going to be demoted to the next rank. That was, I am told, due to have been announced on the same day as the day that the NDLEA brought its sting operation out. We're dealing with a situation where the least trustworthy person in the Nigerian space is the Nigerian state and its agents. Routinely, we take anything they say with a pinch of salt or perhaps even a bag full of salt. So all kinds of conspiracies begin to be seeded in this environment. And all these things are not far from the truth. When you look to the fact that Malami was speaking with a journalist only a week or so ago, and in the course of that discussion, he conceded that Kyari had a case made against him justifying any extradition, and if one was made, he will be entertained. And then the very next week, I have this situation where the NDLEA comes out with this fantastic sting operation that he had never managed to carry out in his long history. At least I haven't heard of a single one since its creation, and I'm old enough to remember his creation, I believe in the days of Kwajafa Fulani. He had never done anything of this nature. The same NDLEA, I believe it was it Leo Akabwe, some drug guy imported a whole lot of drugs into Nigeria. On NTA, they were burning it, and then some journalists poked and found that they were burning empty cartons. And then in the same NDLEA is now coming out to say that this super cop that all of them have been venerating, all of a sudden he is being caught dealing drugs. Let's begin to look at something together. This man's operational turf is not narcotics. It's usually armed robbery, murder, kidnapping. If he's coordinating so effectively and so nicely with NDLEA officers to the point where he knows kingpins and is intercepting, you know that this is not just a one-man operation. It's a systemic thing. And the system itself is the one that is giving him up. So I'm happy that a man is being given up, but I'm more interested in seeing to the sanitization of the system. So I'm not going to start clapping for NDLEA or clapping. No. There is more to this. It's a good thing. The beautiful thing about having people defending lies is that eventually they get caught out. Because the more questions you ask, the more lies there.
Well, NDLEA, I'm sure you
recall.
I
thought you were saying something.
Yeah, I was going to ask you a question, Dele. NDLEA, you recall, was roundly lambasted for their role in another attempted extradition a few years ago. And people were saying that NDLEA was acting like the puppet of the American government, trying to arrest a Nigerian citizen for extradition, and it was ultra-virus. So damned if they do, damned if they don't. NDLEA has tried to get involved with extraditions in the past. But are you suggesting then that this whole thing is, the entire thing is a pantomime? What about the other officers who were arrested, publicly named and shamed? What about the issue of the drug couriers confessing that they have NDLEA officials in the Akanu Ibiam International Airport in Enugu who have seen their pictures and what have you, so when they come in bearing narcotics, they just wave through, which is just not, restricted to Enugu Airport. I'm sure that happens in airports all over the country. What's your take on that, and just how far the rot goes, to start on the points that you originally made about this being bigger than one individual?
Let me, first of all, let me be clear. I am not suggesting that this bust is about just covering up for Abba Kyari. It might very well be, but that is the exact problem that we have. We are living in an environment where you cannot take the word of government officials you can't take them at their word. You can't take the words as being truthful. You always have to look behind the meaning most of the time. Now, whether this be part of some pantomime or not, the reality is that the issue is out in the open. What is not in dispute is that the Akanu Ibiam Airport is a transit point for a drug cartel. It is also not in doubt that there are officers of the NDLEA who are involved with this cartel. It is also not in doubt that Abba Kyari is involved. So whether it is a pantomime or not, they've opened the door. The question that we should be asking is, who else are the parties involved in this? Now, if anybody was trying to play some pantomime, obviously this game is already out of their hand. But now let's deal with the specific issue of the laws as it relates to our extradition. If you follow the rules and you do what the law says, all of the time there will be minimal accusations or conspiracy theories being bandied around. You have a situation here where the NDLEA is not acting, in this case, based on a request by the Americans. They are carrying out an independent investigation and they have arrested a man for a crime. Now, whether the court likes it or not, regardless of any extradition treaties we might have with America, and let me be clear, our laws are supreme to any extradition treaty as far as I can tell. I might be wrong, I'm not a judge, and as I've always maintained, I'm a retired lawyer. But what Section 3 Sub 3 says is clear. If this man is charged with this case, this NDLEA charge, which is independent of the Hushpuppi charge, nobody can take him out of Nigeria, because it would be an infraction of Section 3, subsection 3, generally. So as far as that one is concerned, people can turn around and say that, maybe it was an attempt to help him, but it doesn't matter. The fact will be that a crime has been committed. The important thing is, who are the other parties connected to that crime? Now, given a choice between an American prison and a Nigerian prison, I bet you Abba Kyari would rather be in a Nigerian prison. So that he will fight to be kept here. Expect that. Now, that the fact that he does not expunge the case against him in America, I understand that. But the question is how old is Abba Kyari? If Abba Kyari is given a 25-year term in Nigeria, I don't know the upper end of his liabilities under the charge. But if he gets that, what is left? Anyway. This man must be close to 50 or thereabout now. So in my own view, if I were Abba Kyari, I would prefer to be here in Nigeria. So I can only volunteer an opinion based on what the law says.
Well, in any case, I mean, except the U.S. Resource to extraordinary rendition, it will have to, extradition, if there's such a request, we still have to go through due process in Nigeria. And it's the Federal High Court that has jurisdiction under Section 25, subsection 1, you know, for extraditing anybody from Nigeria. So it's a very long process. But I think you've made a great point about how this problem is systemic. It's Abba Kyari tomorrow. Who else will it be tomorrow? So let's talk politics. Now the presidential race is on, and there's so much talk about zoning, rotational presidency, and some people saying we should forget zoning. So when you look at the field, and some of the persons who have stepped forward to say they are interested in the various political parties, what do you think Nigeria is faced with? Do you think that there is anyone or two or three persons that we can look at, that we can hope would become the next Messiah for Nigeria, if there is any such thing as a Messiah for Nigeria?
You know, we have this predilection as a people. We ignore the problem in seeking to prefer solutions. So we just pluck solutions out of the air, and this has accounted for all manner of people coming forward, bringing themselves as the solutions to the Nigerian problems. Our problems will never be saved by personnel changes. I have said this ad nauseum. No matter who becomes the president of Nigeria, if we do not deal with our systemic and structural problems, we will never come out of this mess. And I'm not too sure we have too long with which to continue with these experimentations. So let's first of all be clear. I am not enthused by the prospect of personnel change as a route to our redemption, if I may use that word. Now, you've now asked a question that obviously cannot be run away from, those who have volunteered themselves. I was asked this question about a month ago, and I remember saying clearly that one, I didn't consider Asiwaju Bola Ahmed Tinubu a candidate. I was very convinced, even back then, that there was sufficient impairments to render his candidacy a non-starter. But what do I know? I'm not a politician, and the politicians always happen to know what we do not know. So for some reason, the man is being dragged up and down the place, having himself. I don't want to get into the area. I don't want to get into the personal arena, but it's obvious that the man is incapable of the rigors. But that's all well and good. But I do say this clearly. He is not in any way, shape, or form capable of transforming the Nigerian situation. He's had 22 years in Lagos already. I live in Lagos. You live in Lagos. We're all in Lagos. If this is the best that a man can do in 22 years of unchallenged hegemony in the state that has the most capacity, I challenge any one of you to suggest that you've entered a government hospital in the last 10 years, both Tundun and Doc. Even your whole building there, take a poll, you'll find out that nobody's children is going to a public school, nobody's children goes to a government hospital. There is a complete failure of social services. I believe if you look at the school enrollment figures in Lagos State, you find very quickly that Lagos State has less than, for every 10 classroom space in Lagos State, less than 3 belong to the Lagos State government itself. So the public school system is non-existent. And this man has been there for 22 years. Jack Conde spent 4 years. We're still talking about him. Then you talk about road. So when the time comes, if he truly becomes a candidate, then we'll
Dele,
deal with the specifics of his record.
Dele, sorry to interrupt you. You kept saying Asiwaju Tinubu has been in Lagos for 22 years. The Constitution allowed him a tenure of 2 terms. That would be 8 years. Why do you say 22?
Doc, Yorubas have this proverb. They say, Alamoran bini Oyo. You are an Alamoran bini Oyo. Alamoran bini Oyo in the sense that the fact of Tinubu's hegemony in Lagos is not up for debate. It is not up for debate. I live in Lagos. We all live in Lagos. We should at least tell ourselves the basic truth. The reality is that his word is law in Lagos. Whether you are talking about the judiciary or you are talking about the legislative houses or you are talking about the streets, he rules the streets. We all know this. You might deny it, okay, maybe for balance and etiquette, but I am saying it, and I have no apologies for saying it. His word is law in Lagos State, and even when he's not the one speaking, laws are made in his name. So let's be specific. As far as Lagos State is concerned, responsibility for its success or failure stays on Asiwaju Bola Ahmed Tinubu's table. They will be pointing at the rail line as achievement. They will be asking at what cost. These are issues that will come up when we come to the campaign. So there is the issue of the record, there is the issue of the health, there is the issue of the mental capacity. We will deal with all of that at the appropriate time. Other people will want to point at Professor Osinbajo. I've said this, it's clear. He's a brilliant man, no doubt about his capacities intellectually, but that is not what this is about. Anybody who is not putting a plan on the table, explaining clearly where we are going, because we are actually in a mess, and anyone should see it, and I don't think any one of them is blind to the fact that we are in a mess. So if we are in a mess and you are asking to lead, I imagine that you will provide a roadmap to show us where you intend to take us to. Almost without equivocation, Nigerians are united in saying that there is something fundamentally wrong with our governance structures. We all know where we missed the way, but we continue to run away from the inevitable, which is to restructure the country to allow citizenship to emerge and then to allow the regions which will emerge from such a restructure to become engine rooms for the development of the Nigerian space. None of them is talking about these. All they are talking about is vote me into power. Vote you into power so that you run the next feeding trough. Now, that is when you deal with those coming out of the Southwest, which in my own honest opinion, I've been known to use pretty strong language in relation to that opinion, and I don't want to travel that route today so that I don't offend people. But there has been a cleavage in southern Nigeria that has lasted my entire generation, my entire lifetime. I was born in '68, in the middle of the Civil War. That issue has blighted the entirety of Nigerian history, and that is the dichotomy in the South. Why is it so difficult for my Yoruba brothers to understand that it is in our own enlightened selfish interest to support Ndigbo's claim to the presidency, but deal with that to one side? This is me conceding that even as a sense of equity, even for our own enlightened selfish interest, we should do that. But let's now deal with, if we are doing that, is it Rochas? Is it Oji Uzokalu? It's not about persons, but persons must have pedigree, they must have records of achievement, sterling integrity. These are not the kind of persons. Ndigbo has to bring forth his best, but bringing forth his best is not enough. That best must also understand we are not interested in exchanging the tribal occupant for another tribal occupant who focuses on one section without looking to restructure the whole. So as far as I'm concerned, this election cycle has not really started because nobody has engaged with ideas. They are engaging with persons, and those persons are not going to cut it. This has to be about ideas. Where are we going from here? You have to lead with vision. We've had enough visionless people ruling Nigeria. If we need leaders, they must put visions on the table, ideas by which they intend to rule. Right. It cannot be, so okay.
Dele, sorry, we're running out of time. I just need to take your thoughts on this issue very quickly, since, as you've said, the Nigerian public has had to become adept at reading between the lines. On 8th of February, it was reported that the Attorney General, Abubakar Malami, said President Buhari won't sign the electoral bill if it's been amended for selfish reasons. Is this setting the stage for yet another rejection?
You see, this question you asked, let me put it this way. Sometimes when you're trying to go through the mind of our rulers in order to discern what they might be planning, it's almost like an exercise in swimming in a sewer line, because it's almost impossible to understand what motivates them to take certain decisions that they do take. Think about it this way. An amendment was sent to the president. He said, oh, he was self-serving. At the last minute, just before they went on recess, he declined assent. Or was it after they had even left? But it was impossible to do anything about it until they returned. Now they've returned. They've sent an amended version back to him. Even if he's not going to sign, which is his prerogative, he needs to come up with this decision quicker and also then point out exactly what the problem is with the current one so that when they want to pass, look, the president said so in open daylight to everybody's hearing that they took the budget and inflated it, but he signed it. But this one, the electoral bill, which threatens to give some measure of powers to the electorate, which means that your PVC can be useful for once if the votes are transmitted electronically from the polling booth. The man is deterring again. So, frankly, I'm always willing to, in most cases, just resolve it in their favor, that they are doing their usual thing. He won't sign. Let him prove us wrong. I hope he does, but I don't expect him to sign again. He'll find some other excuse.
Well, thank you very much, Dele Farotimi, for joining us on the morning show today. Thank you.